Hi, welcome to Speaking with Sonnet. Today we are going to be talking about justice and mercy in The Merchant of Venice. So, very quickly, the definitions of both of these are justice, and to be just is to be fair or impartial, proper or right. So, the proper and the right way to act, whereas mercy is compassionate treatment of an offender or an enemy who is in one's power, or a merciful act. So the idea of compassion, the compassionate behaviour towards someone, and in the court scene there is this ping-ponging between justice and mercy and who wants what. But let's go right back to the start. The reason why Shylock is so keen to get justice is obviously because of the way that he has been treated.
Yes, so throughout the play we hear from Shylock time and again the treatment that he's faced at specifically Antonio's hand. I was going to say the Christians, but it's specifically Antonio. Mm-hmm. And so one of the examples we have on page 25, Shylock has one of his lovely speeches, and he says, Signor Antonio, many a time and often a realto you have rated me about my usances. And then he goes on to say that he calls him misbeliever, cutthroat dog, and spit upon my Jewish gabardine. So we often talk about that quote because it's such an important quote. But it shows, in this case, when you're talking about mercy and justice, it shows exactly why Shylock feels like he deserves justice, because of the bad treatment that he's faced at the hands of Antonio.
Yeah, and what we were talking about beforehand is the fact that Shylock talks about his Jewish faith and the fact that it is like a badge of his tribe. So you get this idea that what he's doing in going for the bond is very much for the Jewish people and the way that the Jewish people were treated in Venice. But you also get a sense that this is personal, which is something that we've spoken about before. Now, the first time we see Shylock is when he's talking to Bassanio about the money. And it's this very, very quick conversation on page 19. Do you want to be Bassanio? We'll just do these two little things. And so Shylock says, 3,000 ducats, well.
Aye, sir, for 3 months.
For 3 months, well.
For the which, as I told you, Antonio shall be bound.
Antonio shall become bound, well. So what you can infer from that is, because it's so quick, you might infer that Shylock is plotting, in a way, how he can have his justice against Antonio, who, remember, has been so personally vile to him and odious in his behaviour. So, but also this does reinforce to the Christian audience that the very first time we see Shylock, he's plotting, he's talking about money. So in a way, it's intensifying that kind of villainy about him, isn't it?
The stereotype. The first thing the Jewish character says is about money, which would have played up to the stereotype, as you said. And that perfectly sets the scene as well, because the way he is with Bassanio is he's taking his time more, he's thinking about it, like you said, he's most likely plotting here. Yeah. Whereas as soon as the character of Antonio arrives a few pages later, he's much more kind of, I want to say sucking up, but he's kind of trying to say to Antonio things like, oh, I would be friends with you, he says.
Don't you think he's being sincere then?
No.
Don't you?
No, I don't think so, because he knows at this point that he's got Antonio where he wants him after so long, probably. Yeah. He's finally got a point where Antonio is coming to him asking for something from him. Yeah. And so Shylock knows he has the upper hand. So I think he's sort of playing with Antonio when he says that.
And he does say this on page 21. He says, if I can catch him once upon the hip, I will feed fat the ancient grudge I bear him. He hates our sacred nation.
And that's an aside, which means he's just saying that to the audience. He's not saying that to Antonio. Yeah. You know, obviously he would actually hear him, but that's what it's supposed to be.
Reinforcing the idea that he's plotting. But a modern audience would think he's just and right in doing it, because it's the only time he can probably get his revenge on somebody who, in the eyes of the Lord, does no wrong by spitting on him as a Jew.
Exactly, yeah. But, you know, to an extent, I think everyone would be able to see that it's justice, just that other people wouldn't feel that he deserves.
No.
He deserves it. Maybe an Elizabethan audience would feel he doesn't deserve it.
So something else is this little scene, which I think is a nice little scene. Act 2, Scene 8. And it is where we hear certain things about Shylock and Antonio, reinforcing the stereotypes of both of them, the good Christian and the bad Jew. But again, this is where we realise just how hard Shylock has become in the ways that the Christians are. So on page 63, Salarino and Salanio are mocking Shylock for the loss of Jessica, and Salanio actually speaks as if he was Shylock, and he sort of says, "My daughter, oh my ducats, oh my daughter, fled with a Christian." And very short sentences with that exclamation mark.
Yeah.
So they're mocking him. And then he says, all the boys in Venice follow him, crying his stones, his daughter, his ducats. And you get the sense that if this was happening, poor Shylock's lost his daughter, and the Christians are mocking him, another reason why he would want his bond, and he would want justice personally. A personal, revenge against this man who has done these terrible things to him.
But again, we as the audience would have seen all of that unfolding, the Jessica being taken from her house by Lorenzo, and that was part of their plan, wasn't it? To take her away from Shylock, to leave him weaker, which is why they invited him out to that dinner so that she would be home alone at that time. So this is all part of their plan to make Shylock weaker. So at this point, we are thinking, poor Shylock, look what they're doing to him, and we do feel like he deserves justice at this point, because they're hurting him.
Do you think a Christian audience would, though?
An Elizabethan audience in...
a Shakespearean audience.
No.
And another reason why this is because this scene has got two parts. So it's got them mocking the Jew, and then it's got them talking lovingly about the Christian. So Shylock has lost his daughter and his money, and he's all up in arms, and he is really angry, and everyone laughs at him. And then Antonio says goodbye to Bassanio on page 65, and he says, even there, this is Antonio's, eye being big with tears, turning his face, he put his hand behind him, and with affection wondrous sensible, he wrung Bassanio's hand. So you're seeing the good Christian who loves Bassanio, and he's losing him, but he's dealing with it with grace and integrity and love. And then the Christians then say, let's find him out and quicken his embraced heaviness with some delight or other. So they show huge compassion and sympathy towards Antonio as a Christian, whereas they mock Shylock, again, hardening his heart and making him want to seek his revenge and his justice.
Well, and exactly, if you imagine them on either sides of the scales, the symbol of justice, you've already got Antonio, it's already in his favour, because they already feel this way about him. They love him, he can do no wrong. And Shylock, just because of their religions, and Shylock is already looked down upon. So already the scales are out of balance.
The way that Shakespeare does it very well, the speech on 77, when Shylock is talking about if you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? And then he says, if a Jew wrong a Christian, what is his humility? Revenge. If a Christian wrong a Jew, what should his sufferance be by Christian example? Why, revenge. The villainy you teach me, I will execute.
So Shylock is justifying his actions by saying, you have taught me to be this way. I want justice, I want revenge, because of the way you guys have treated me. So they have made him into this villain, is what he's arguing.
Yeah.
Again, I think I said this before, it's like with Frankenstein's monster. They've made Shylock this way because of the lack of love and compassion and kindness they show him. He's become this monster.
You've taught me villainy.
Yeah.
You've taught me to be this awful.
Yeah.
Again, the Christian... And actually, the Shakespearean audience would be totally affronted by that, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
They would think that was absolutely awful that a Jew could dare say that to a Christian. Whereas now, we're so much more compassionate and tolerant.
Yeah.
We feel the humiliation of Shylock having to say that.
Well, actually, what I really like is if you watch the film adaptation with Al Pacino, the one that we show in school, the reaction, you've got the prostitutes in the background, you've got Salanio and Salarino, to whom Shylock is speaking at this moment. And in the film adaptation, which is obviously modern, they're all kind of, they're all speechless. They're listening to Shylock and they can't believe the things he's saying. Like, it's almost like the director wanted to show that it's clicking for them. Oh my God, this is how we've treated this poor guy.
Yeah.
And then we have to wonder, obviously, would it have been the complete opposite? Yeah. Sometimes we wonder in Elizabethan times, would the audience be laughing the whole way through this speech? Sometimes we think this speech is too beautiful. It's too obvious, the meaning behind it. How could anyone laugh at this? So it's really hard
Because it goes to the very base of what mankind is,
Exactly.
isn't it? We're all the same.
So it's really hard not to imagine even an Elizabethan audience being taken aback by this speech. But maybe they would have known what we know about them and their prejudices and the rest of the themes of this play. Maybe they would have just laughed.
And also there's a link to the caskets, isn't there? To the gold casket, where he talks about the fact that, you know, all that glisters is not gold. He's talking very much about the superficiality of things, and actually you've got to look beyond the outside of something, haven't you?
Yeah.
To really get to the, you know, what something is. So that could be something.
I guess there's a sense of irony in if that's what he's saying, in that Shylock seems to love his money so much, but he's also preaching to us, look beyond that.
Yeah.
In that sense, it could be funny, like, oh, here comes, you know, they might have said something like, here comes the Jew who's obsessed with money, and he's teaching us to look beyond.
Yeah, they'd be like,
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, well,
yeah, you don't.
yeah. So
You
it
love
could
your
have
money.
been, could
You
have been a
love
sense
yours.
of irony, which also would have been funny.
Yeah, that would have been really funny. It'd be like, oh, listen to him.
Yeah.
So then we go on to page 99, Act 3, Scene 3. Another very small scene, but it has great importance. And the reason why it has great importance is because Antonio, who is has lost his ships and he is at the mercy of Shylock, goes to him and Shylock completely dismisses him. Shylock says, "Jailer, look to him, tell me not of mercy. This is the fool that lent out money gratis. Jailer, look to him."
And I love this because every single utterance that Antonio gives, it's cut off. There's a hyphen if you look at the page, and it's cut off to imply that Shylock is interrupting him.
Yep.
So if we were talking about power here, it's completely shifted. But I think the purpose of that is to heighten the tension in the play.
Yeah.
Because obviously Antonio is the merchant of Venice. He's our hero. He's our protagonist. He's the one that we care about, that we're supposed to be following. And at this point, he's at a disadvantage. So at this point in the play, we would be feeling that tension, like, oh no, our poor hero is going to be beaten by the villain. And that's what the purpose of this scene. However, look at it with modern eyes, and it's the part of the play where we're like, ha.
Yeah, good for you,
Certainly right,
Shylock.
Antonio. Good to see you finally.
And what's
Get what you
interesting,
deserve.
is that he keeps on repeating the word bond, oath, bond. And actually, he does have the law on his side.
Yeah.
So he's not being illegal. He's being obviously cruel and murderous, but he's not doing anything beyond the scope of legality at that time. And this is why I think, personally, I would love him to have had his bond, because it was within the law. He hasn't done anything unlawful, has he? He's managed to sneakily get his way to get this arrogant Christian who loves to spit on him and call him names and, you know, go against his business plan by lending out money without interest.
I mean, the reason why modern audiences may prefer it this way is because Shylock ends being the victim and we still respect him. If he'd murdered Antonio, wouldn't we change our opinion of him?
No.
Wouldn't he just be a murderer?
No. No, I don't think so. Because and also because he talks about the badge of his tribe, and it's just, you know, it's anti-Semitic, and he was the one man that could. And if you think about it, teaching the Christians a lesson, one man teaching one Christian man a lesson would have been, I don't know, making.
Yeah, for me, the speech on Act 3, Scene 1. The if you prick us do we not bleed speech, I can't remember what scene it is, it's Act 3 anyway. That speech, for me, serves that purpose. It teaches them a lesson, it shows them, I'm the same as you, I'm a human. Alright, maybe they don't really learn from it because they still destroy him.
Yeah.
But that, for me, was the moment of, wow, Shylock is my hero, this is fantastic.
Then we hit the court scene, which is when these two, Justice and Mercy, they kind of crash together, and it kind of, like we said before, ping-pongs.
Yeah.
Give him mercy. I want justice. Oh, right, you can't have justice. Well, I'll give him mercy then. No, you can't. We're going to have justice. So.
But what's fantastic about this scene, it's funny, I suppose, in a sort of sad way, is the Duke at the beginning, so the guy who has to ultimately makes the decision, I suppose. He says, which pound of flesh, this poor merchant's flesh? Already the Duke is showing bias towards he's on Antonio's side, isn't he? He's
Yeah.
referring to him as the poor merchant.
Yeah.
There's no shame. He's not hiding the fact that he's on Antonio's side. He's imploring Shylock to show mercy, to forget the bond that they'd signed. That is not what a judge would do in a fair court of law.
No. And he then goes on to talk about it, and Shylock is saying, with the Duke talking, and the Duke says on page 119, "How shalt thou hope for mercy, rendering none?" And Shylock says, "What judgment shall I dread, doing no wrong?"
Mm-hmm.
So, he doesn't fear anything happening to him when he dies, because he's taken another man's life, because he says, "I've done no wrong.
Yeah.
This is within the law. This is within your Christian law."
It's not just that the law is on his side, it's also that Antonio agreed to this bond.
Yeah.
He's had Antonio's word, and Antonio he signed it knowing full well what the consequences would be.
I stand for judgment. I stand for judgment.
Answer, shall I have it?
Yeah, which he does. So then we move on. Obviously, then Portia comes dressed up as Balthazar, and she has this very famous speech. I'll be Portia. "Then must the Jew be merciful.
On what compulsion must I? Tell me that.
The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blessed him that gives and him that takes." That's on page 125. So she's saying, "Shylock, come on, be merciful. It will appeal to you, and it will obviously save Antonio, but you will, and there is this truth. I mean, she's talking truth.
Yeah.
Being merciful is the right thing to do."
Yeah, this speech is wonderful. I only wish that Portia herself believed it.
Yes,
Because-
yeah,
Yeah, when it comes her time or to show mercy, she
doesn't.
Well, we'll come to that in a second, like you said. But she says that it is twice blessed. So if you show mercy, you will also be blessed. So she's using these persuasive techniques to try and persuade him that being merciful is the right thing. And now let's have a look what Shylock's response is. "My deeds upon my head, I crave the law."
The penalty and forfeit of my bond. Again, the repetition of the word bond, because it's also like reinforcing, I have the law, I have the law.
Mm-hmm.
And dramatically, this would always like remind the audience all the time, how does he get out of this? How could he possibly get out of this? I don't know how he gets out of it. Because how can he?
Yeah.
There's that aspect of it as well, isn't there? It's like there's no way out. That's what the whole dramatic tension is.
Yeah.
It's only when Portia comes across that he's able to do that, isn't it?
Well, and Portia's a loophole,
Yeah.
which, if you don't remember it, anyone, she says, "That's fine, take your pound of flesh," but it doesn't say anything in the contract about shedding any blood. So she finds this loophole, which is obviously ridiculous, because obviously it's implied that if you cut somebody's flesh, there's going to be blood. So it's a ridiculous loophole,
Yeah.
but that's how the law works. And actually, funny enough, the law still works like that today.
Yeah.
There are always those silly little loopholes. You have to be very careful with bonds and
Yeah.
contracts and things. But it's so ridiculous, and the fact that it's ridiculous, comedy, remember, everything's about comedy in this play, but also it highlights how doomed Shylock was from the start.
Yeah.
He was never going to win.
No, just like she was never going to marry Morocco.
Yeah.
Silly Billy. And then he says, obviously, the Jew shall have all justice, soft no haste. He shall have nothing but the penalty. So this is on page 133, so 133. Obviously, then she's able to say to him, "You can't do that. You can't spill a drop of blood." And then we go on, and actually, the Christians show just how hypocritical are, because they show him no mercy at all, do they?
So Portia actually asks Antonio, at this point it's over to Antonio to decide whether to show Shylock mercy, because obviously the penalty for threatening a Christian's life is death.
Yeah.
So at this point Shylock's about to be killed for threatening to kill a Christian.
Yeah.
How the tables turned very quickly there.
Yeah.
And Portia says, What mercy can you render him, Antonio? So she's using that key word. She's asking Antonio, can you show Shylock any mercy? And of course, Antonio, great Antonio, does.
Yeah, so on page 137, he says, 2 things provided more. For this favour, he presently becomes a Christian. The other, that he do record a gift here in the court of all he dies possessed unto his son Lorenzo and his daughter. Which is, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? And we were saying you can't destroy Shylock any more than stripping him of his Jewish faith.
Right.
Because that is so integral to who he is and what he does and his friends and the way that he believes. And he thinks of himself as a Jew, doesn't he, as part of the Jewish community and the Jewish faith. At that time, maybe they would have thought that it was better than killing him because they're giving him a chance to redeem himself and become a Christian.
But actually, Shylock says he'd rather they take his life than take his religion from him. And then, of course, the last thing he says, I pray you give me leave to go from hence. I am not well. Send the deed after me and I will sign it.
That's it.
And that's the last we hear of Shylock.
Poor Shylock.
He's stripped of the 2 most important things, his money, his religion. He lost his family earlier on in the play when he lost Jessica.
So the whole point is that there is no mercy for him. The Christians show him no mercy. And they just forget about it.
They celebrate and he's forgotten.
So this is why I think this play is so difficult to come to terms with as a modern audience, because you hope that there is an element of justice, don't you, in the world. And maybe, Shakespeare is showing we believe in justice and fairness and the justice, kind of natural justice, and sometimes it doesn't happen, it just doesn't work.
But then that's the interesting thing with this play. If you look at it from different points of view, different people are ending with justice. So if you look at it from the point of view of Antonio and his life has just been threatened by Shylock, he does get justice because Shylock is punished. So if you're looking at it from the Christian's point of view, wonderful, justice has been served. If you look at it from Shylock's point of view, the justice he deserves is that Antonio should die, or he should get a pound of his flesh.
Yeah.
Because he signed that contract. And Shylock doesn't get that justice.
I hate Antonio.
So it's all about point of view.
Yeah.
But when it comes to mercy, from the Christian's point of view, they have shown mercy, haven't they? Because they've said, we won't kill you. We'll let you become a Christian.
I know. Aren't we kind?
Yeah. And then from Shylock's point of view, he didn't want to show mercy. He didn't feel like he had to show mercy because of what he's been through.
Everything is so nuanced. No one's a real villain and no one's a real goodie. And
exactly.
That's the whole point about Shakespeare.
The grey area.
The grey area. Anyway, thank you very much for listening again. This is Miss Morris, I am Miss Sonnet, and as always, our producer is Mr. Lavington.
Yay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.